Hi, my name's Sophie and welcome to podcast episode number 4. Today I'm going to do a typical podcast episode, but I just want to start by saying thank you so much to everybody who viewed and commented on my last video, the yarn shopping on the Isle of Skye video. It was so nice to see all your lovely comments, and there's been a fair few new subscribers here, so welcome if you're new. It was nice to see that people were reminiscent on their time in Skye and enjoyed the video, so there will be more yarn tour videos coming up. But as I said, today it's going to be a general, typical knitting podcast, and I have a lot to show you. So I'm not wearing any knitwear today because of the amount of stuff I have in the video, and I'll get started on my finished objects. So my first finished object is my Dagmar zipper sweater by Petite Knit. I wasn't too far off finishing this sweater in the last video, so I'm not surprised this is a finished object in this podcast. This is a pattern by Petite Knit, as I say, and it's knit in a yarn that's from Willowford farm, which is a family farm. It's 100% British wool, and it's in this really deep chocolatey brown colour. It's described as being a DK and it's spun as a DK, but because it's a really kind of rustic, lofty yarn, it knits up to more of an Aran weight. I knit the size medium on 5.5mm needles, which is half a size up from what Petite Knit recommends of 4.5mm needles, as I'm a tight knitter. And I was aiming for around 25 to 30 centimetres positive ease with the size medium. When I did my initial gauge swatch, I was able to meet the gauge in the pattern, which is 18 stitches to 24 rows on the 5mm needles. But my finished object has come out a lot tighter, and my gauge is quite different in the finished knit than it was in the gauge swatch. So I've ended up with 20 centimetres positive ease, but I think this has been a happy accident. I'll talk you through the gauge first. So the gauge that I've ended up with is 19 stitches by 28 rows in the diamond shape and 25 stitches by 28 rows in the honeycomb cables. Both of those gauges are 1 stitch up from the gauge recommended in the pattern and 3 rows up from the gauge recommended in the pattern. That 1 stitch difference in the stitch gauge is what's caused me to have less positive ease. One of the possible reasons that I think my gauge might be different is because I've blocked this knit, but I haven't blocked it with my blocking mat and my pins and kind of been able to stretch it out and adapt it to the size that I want. I've just dunked it in water, let it soak, and blocked it as it wants to sit. So I think I would be able to kind of meet that stitch gauge for certain, the just being 1 stitch off, if I was to quite aggressively pin it out, which is possibly what's happened with my gauge swatch. I've kind of adapted and manipulated and stretched it more than I probably should have done to get an accurate swatch. So yeah, I think I'd be able to meet the stitch gauge with that, with stretching it out, but not the row gauge. The other reason I think my gauge may be off is that this is just kind of a heavier garment. It's a lot more knitting. My knitting is kind of maybe tightened up as I've been doing the cables, and kind of, I don't know, stress has gone into the knitting maybe at some points. I think your gauge, it can just be very, very different in a tiny little 4x4 inch gauge swatch compared to a big garment that has kind of gravity and the weight of the garment itself pulling on itself. So yeah, I'm not too concerned that my gauge swatch measurements haven't quite added up, because I'm happy with the fit. But yeah, they're my reasons I think might have caused the difference. But I really like the fit of the 20 centimetre positive ease of this jumper, so I'm really happy with that. I think if it was any more oversized, it may feel like it's kind of drowning me a bit, and I think 20 centimetres ease is what I'm going to aim for in future projects, as I really do like it in this jumper. And the 3 stitch difference in my row gauge really didn't make too much of a difference, because Petite Knit lists the length that you should knit the pattern to. She likes you to end at a certain point of the diamond cable, but you knit up to a certain length which reaches around that point. I just followed the points in the medium, in the pattern, so I was able to kind of meet the length that the medium recommends, and I do like that for myself. I like a longer jumper. I don't like anything to be kind of too cropped, so I did add an extra motif on from what I could see was in Petite Knit's pattern photos, but the extra motif kind of met the length that she recommended in the pattern. So yeah, I'm happy with the outcome. I have seen in a few kind of Ravelry projects and people on podcasts saying that they've modified or they're slightly unhappy with the width of the arms and the depth of the arms. I don't find that the arms are too oversized on me. I quite like that the jumper is a bit kind of cuddly and oversized, but doesn't really drown me. It kind of is that outer layer that I'm looking for, that I can wear over a few layers underneath. It feels like more of a jacket than a jumper or sweater to me, so yeah, I kind of like that the arms are a bit bigger, that I can fit kind of more bulky clothes or another jumper or something underneath. The only thing I'm slightly unsure about, and I keep kind of asking my boyfriend, oh, are you sure this looks okay, is the collar. I feel like the collar is slightly too large. I think it's slightly too tall for my neck. Maybe I have a particularly short neck, who knows, but I feel like the collar sits very high up, and I definitely don't like to wear it zipped all the way up unless I'm really, really cold and don't care what my neck looks like. I think with the zip down slightly, it does look a bit more flattering, but I think if I was to knit this again, that's something that I'd consider. I'd make the neck slightly shorter. As well as the depth of the collar, I think I've maybe picked up too many stitches around the collar, because the collar does kind of ripple at the front. I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to tell, but I think the weight of the zip kind of pulls the collar forward, and it ripples slightly or pulls down at the front. And I think maybe with less stitches having been picked up on the collar, it would sit a bit more kind of tight, not too tight on my neck, but so that it didn't kind of ripple and sag. I'm definitely not going to be redoing the collar. I think it's just something to consider if I was to knit this again. And the reason I'm not undoing the collar is it's because it's a lot of work to redo, and a lot of work that I don't want to redo. It would mean kind of unpicking the bit that I've sewn down of the collar and undoing all of the 1x1 rib that's kind of folded down to shorten the length. So yeah, something that I'm going to live with, something I don't think is too bad, and I don't really notice it too much when I'm wearing it. It's just when I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror, I do think, is that slightly too large? But overall, very, very happy with this pattern, very happy with the yarn choice. As I said in my last video, using one strand of yarn and a very rustic sticky yarn meant I was able to do the cables without a cable needle, and made the process much more enjoyable. And I think the colour of yarn really suits me, if I do say so myself. I really like this chocolatey brown colour. So yeah, very, very happy with this piece, 10 out of 10, and it's been getting a lot of wear whilst in Scotland, throughout the day really, from morning to evening I've been able to wear this jumper. So yeah, very happy. We'll move on to the next one. The next thing I want to mention is my Semper Slipover by the Knit Purl Girl. This was a finished object in my last knitting podcast, episode 3, but I just want to bring it back onto this podcast because since I've blocked it, it's had a bit of a transformation. I was maybe a bit kind of dismissive of this piece in the last podcast, as I wasn't happy with the overall fit at the end, and I was having trouble kind of figuring out how to block my knits, which I've now solved. And pre-blocking, I had zero ease on this slipover, and I really didn't like the fit of that. It kind of hugged me quite tightly, and I felt like it was not looking very good over clothing, which is how I'd normally wear my slipover and vest, kind of over a long sleeve or short sleeve top. But since blocking, this garment has grown, so I'm now getting 5 centimetres positive ease, which is what I wanted in the first place. And I really like the 5 centimetres ease with this. I'm quite surprised it grew that much because I didn't expect that much grow and give with the silk mohair. I didn't say, but this is knit with 1 strand of Malabrigo lace in the colour Cirrus grey, which is a merino wool, and 2 strands of drops kid silk mohair in grey. And yeah, I didn't think the mohair would kind of stretch and block out so much. The silk in the silk mohair normally kind of holds its shape, I find, and doesn't really kind of give very much with blocking. But yeah, I'm really happy with this vest now. I've worn it once with a short sleeve top underneath and I really liked the fit of it, so I'm going to give it some more glowing reviews than last time, and I'm happy with it. So moving on to works in progress, my first work in progress is the one that I am most excited about. I am making the Ebba sweater by Sari Nordlund. The Ebba sweater really meets an idea that I had in my head. I really wanted to make a summer sweater or a summer layering piece, something long sleeve that I can throw on in the summer when it gets a bit chillier in the evenings or if it's a bit windy, but still kind of feels very authentically summery. And I think the Ebba pullover does a really good job of meeting that. Sari Nordlund created this pattern so that she uses lace stitches to create mock cables, and I think the lace stitches are perfect for that summer pattern as the lace kind of lets in a bit of air, it's a bit breezier and a bit more breathable, but I still really like the look of the mock cables. I think it's a bit less feminine than a typical lace pattern. I don't find typical lace patterns really kind of meet my personal style, which is kind of a bit more kind of boxy, masculine, a bit more sporty maybe. So the mock cables of the lace in this pattern is kind of perfect for that. I've made a few modifications to this pattern so that it better suits a summer sweater than a winter sweater. So Sari Nordlund recommends a DK weight wool knitted on 4.5mm needles. Instead of that, I'm using a sport weight yarn on 4.5mm needles, so it's kind of a bit more open, looser, drapier gauge. The yarn that I'm using is Rosários for Alvor, and it's in the colour 13, which is a really beautiful, kind of just a bit brighter than a mustardy yellow colour. Kind of goes along with the theme of the butter yellow that I know is super trendy at the moment. And the thing that drew me to this Rosários for Alvor is the content of the yarn. So it's 50% wool and 50% linen. It's a yarn blend that I've never come across before, and I think the wool linen is again perfect for summer. I really like a linen yarn. I love to wear linen. I think it's really kind of breathable, but it can be a bit tough to work with and a bit tough on my hands. So I like that there's wool content in this as well to give it a bit more elasticity, kind of flexibility. It's much nicer to work with and it feels super soft. I find that linen normally softens up after blocking, but this is just soft as it is pre-blocking, just in the ball. So I absolutely love this yarn, and I haven't obviously worn it yet, so I don't know how it wears, but just the experience of knitting with it, I definitely recommend it. So the gauge I'm getting is 20 stitches to 30 rows, and the pattern recommends 19 stitches to 28 rows. So I'm not wildly off gauge, but it means that I'm knitting a size up to get my preferred ease. I'm looking for around 25 centimetres positive ease with this piece, so it's a bit kind of oversized and drapey and flowy. So as well as the kind of changes with the gauge and with the yarn that I'm using, the other big modification that I've made is to what is supposed to be reverse stockinette stitch at the side of the jumper. Sari Nordlund uses reverse stockinette stitch at the side, and I think it's as a way to more easily grade her sweater from the smaller sizes to the larger sizes. You just kind of add extra centimetres in this reverse stockinette. But I didn't really like the look of this on her pattern photos. I feel like it really kind of divides up the cables and everything looks like it doesn't flow very well and looks a bit blocky, and I wanted to find a way to incorporate kind of the cables throughout the knit without having that reverse stockinette section. And I'm knitting the size 4, and in the size 4 this was fairly easy to do. So I don't know how much to say without giving away too much of the pattern, but I've knit up the back panel and I'm currently knitting up the front panels, which I'll then connect under the arms. And as I'm knitting up the back panel, the reverse stockinette section is supposed to be 11 stitches long, and I found that half of a cabled pattern was 12 stitches long. So rather than increasing to 11 stitches, I've increased to 12 stitches, and I've incorporated kind of half of the large cabled pattern into that section. So I don't know how well I'm going to be able to show you. So the large mock cabled section is the 2 kind of diagonal pieces that go down, and I've just incorporated one diagonal piece which alternates to the previous one into this section here at the side. I think with the smaller sizes, so the size 1 and 2, there's not that many, if any, reverse stockinette at the side, so it's not very noticeable, but this does change as the sizes go up. So you'd be able to kind of work this half cable section really easily for the size 4, as I have, but I'm not sure how easy that's going to be to incorporate kind of as you go up the sizes, until you're getting to a point where you can increase kind of by a whole cable section. If you want to use this modification and you're not knitting the size 4, I think changing your gauge might be easier. So you're using the measurements for the size 4, but your gauge is larger, so you're going to get a kind of larger garment if that's what you're looking for. But yeah, if you are kind of looking for a modification like this, I hope this somewhat helps and I've explained it hopefully well. I will be adding this to my Ravelry very shortly. I'm not the best at keeping updated on Ravelry, and I'll include the modifications on there so it's a bit easier to follow in a written format rather than me rambling. And the other modification I'm making for this is I've seen a lot of comments in the Ravelry page for this that the arms in the pattern are really tight, and I definitely don't want anything to be tight about this sweater. I want it to be loose, drapey, so rather than knitting the armhole depth for the size 4, I've gone a size up and I've knit the armhole depth for the size 5 to add that couple of extra centimetres on to give me a bit more ease around the arms, and hopefully that will be enough ease that I'll be comfortable with it. I did see one person say she was knitting the size 1 for the body but 5 for the arms, so quite a drastic difference. But yeah, I'm hoping just going a size up is going to be enough ease around the arm that I'm looking for. I'm excited to knit more on this. I think the colour is really keeping me inspired, and it's so sunny out, and I'm knitting with a really sunny colour, so I'm having a lot of fun with this and I can't wait to keep you updated. So a piece that I thought would be a finished object but is still unfortunately not is my Camisole number 9 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. This camisole is taking me so much longer than I could ever have imagined. I bet if I was to calculate the time, I've put as much work into this as I would normally put into a jumper. I think with the really tiny stitches, it's just taken me forever, but we're getting there. We're close to finishing. I'm knitting this camisole in Cotton Merino by Knitting for Olive in the colour Bark, and I have absolutely nothing bad to say about the Cotton Merino so far. I'm really enjoying working with the yarn. It's really kind of comfortable to work with. It feels super soft. It's really drapey. The stitch definition is good and the stitches have come out looking really nice. So yeah, nothing bad to say about the yarn, and nothing really bad, I suppose, to say about the pattern. It's just long. The gauge is 30 stitches by 38 rows, and it's knit on 3mm needles for the main part of the body. When I last spoke to you guys in a podcast, I was knitting in the round on the body, and it was my kind of easy passenger car knitting, and knitting round and round and round in the body was fairly enjoyable. I kind of didn't see the time pass because I was looking out the window and just knitting in the round, and I was having a bit of fun. And then I got to the folded hem at the bottom, the collar and the sleeves. So for the folded hem at the bottom, you decrease needle size, you knit a few rounds, you purl around to help with the folding, and then knit a few more rounds. And then you bind off by picking up the stitches kind of where you've started by dropping down that needle size. So you pick up the stitches and you knit them together and bind it off. And I've done this technique before with kind of double folded collars and sleeves, but I've never found it to roll as much as it is on this pattern. I'm not entirely sure why it's rolling so much. I don't know if I've bound it off too tightly or too loosely. I don't know if I've maybe miscounted the amount of rows, because when I try and fold it back over, it does seem to be kind of bubbling in the back, so maybe I have too many rows before I then bound it off and that's causing it to loop over, or maybe it's just that I haven't blocked it yet. I'm really unsure. I've had a look through other people's projects on Ravelry, and I have seen in quite a lot of the pattern photos theirs is also rolling, so I don't think it's just a me issue, but hopefully with blocking this is gonna fold back down. This is definitely not something that I want to take apart and redo if I can avoid it, so yeah, I hope blocking is going to be the magic key to fixing this. And then I picked up stitches for the neckline. The pattern advises you to pick up stitches on a 2mm needle, but I only have 2.25mm needles and I don't have any 2mm needles, and I didn't fancy buying any, so I've picked up the neckline on 2.25mm needles, and I think that's fine. From some comments on my last knitting podcast, people have said to be very careful and cautious around the collar and the sleeves, to not knit and kind of sew the bind off down too tightly, as it can kind of cinch in quite a lot. So I wasn't too concerned with going up that quarter of a needle size. I didn't mind it being a bit larger. And the picking up the stitches and kind of knitting round on 2.25mm needles was fine again, until I got to the point of sewing the collar down. So you knit a certain amount of rounds from the wrong side, and then you bind off just like your general knit one, pass it over, kind of bind off, and then you sew down the bind off onto the right side to form a decorative kind of detail around the collar and the arms. And I think this detail does come out looking really nice, and I am happy for the most part with the outcome, but it was so tedious and took so long to sew down. I found it was really quite difficult to make sure I was sewing down the right stitches and it kind of all lined up and didn't go a bit wonky or skew-if, and it's taken so long. The other kind of issue I found with this sewn down is that I've got some rippling. It's a bit more difficult to see where you're sewing down along kind of the diagonal sections, and that's really where my rippling is its worst. Again, I'm hoping with a magic block this is gonna fix the rippling around here, and I also don't think it's really too noticeable. I think I'm just noticing it because I'm being a bit of a perfectionist and I want this to look as neat as possible. But yeah, blocking should hopefully be able to fix that. I have done the collar, I've done one armhole, and I've done all of the knitted section for the other armhole. I just need to do that really tedious sewing it down, which is what my evening tonight is going to be spent doing, so this can finally be a finished object, and then I can try it on and see if it fits and I like the fit and block it, and kind of hopefully it will all come together. But for now, I am happy I've got this far with the camisole, and I really don't think I'm going to be knitting another one of these anytime soon, just because of how long it has taken to knit. I don't mind spending a lot of time on a knitted project. I really like putting the time in. It's my hobby. It's kind of calming and relaxing. But when it's something so small and I have so many other projects that I'm really keen to work on, sinking so much time into a camisole is just not what I want to be doing. Maybe if I get loads of wear out of it during the summer, I'll change my mind. But for now, this is going to be my one and only camisole number 9. So my next work in progress is the Quiraing mittens by Maddie Harvey Designs. I spoke about these mittens in my last video, the Isle of Skye video, as I bought this yarn in a shop on the Isle of Skye called Shilasdair. The yarn is Shilasdair Smuid, which is 75% Blue Face Leicester and 25% Gotland, and it's hand dyed. This is the undyed colour, but I've also got a kind of hand dyed, plant dyed colour, which is this beautiful green. I have only knit up this mitten so far, and this is the liner of one of the mittens. If you didn't see my last video, the pattern consists of kind of 4 mittens, I suppose. There's 2 inner layers and 2 outer layers. The inner layers of the mittens are knit in stockinette in a beautiful bright colour, and the outer layer is a lace detailed mitten, and the colour of the inner layer kind of shines through the lace of that outer layer. I am knitting these on 2.5mm needles, and I'm knitting them in the smallest size. Typically, as I'm a tight knitter, my gauge is slightly off. So rather than 26 stitches in 10 centimetres, which is what the pattern recommends, I'm getting 28 stitches in 10 centimetres, so a slightly smaller mitten, but this works perfectly for me. I have oddly very small hands for an adult, and the smallest size in this pattern was still slightly too large for me, so I'm quite glad that these mittens have knitted up smaller, as they fit me absolutely perfectly now. I was really keen to kind of make some progress on this as I was waiting for the yarn for my Ebba pullover to come in, but now that I've got one mitten knitted up and I kind of know how the pattern works and I know that my gauge works and they fit, this is going to be a bit of a longer term project, as I don't need mittens right now. It's definitely not really summer appropriate, and I've got my kind of fix of casting them on and seeing how the yarn works and working with the yarn that I've just bought. So I'm happy for these to go on hold for a bit, but I'm also happy to see how they've knitted up, and I'm very excited to get these going again, maybe during the autumn, so that I can have them ready for the winter. My final work in progress is a pattern called Sheep by Susan B. Anderson. If you saw my last video, I found this Herdwick yarn in a charity shop in Scotland, and I really wanted to knit this Herdwick yarn into a little sheep toy ornament, but I was very unsure on a pattern, and very kindly one of you guys gifted me a pattern through Ravelry, which is Sheep by Susan B. Anderson, to knit up this super cute sheep toy, and I cast it on straight away. I am super grateful for the gift of a pattern. I really appreciate it, and I was so excited to see it come through in my emails. It just really made my day, so thank you so much. And the pattern is really beautiful. It features 3 different sheep, one with a colourwork motif, one with a knit purl design, and the other one using kind of loop stitches to form a loopy, fluffy, sheepy sheep. And I chose to go with the loop design. I'm not entirely sure on the exact weight of the yarn of this Herdwick, so I just chose to knit it up with the needle sizes Susan Anderson recommends in the pattern. As it's a toy, I don't really care too much about the size or how it comes out, as long as it's not so large it doesn't fit on my dashboard. So yeah, I'm just knitting it up with the needles recommended, and it's knitting up very well. It's not too kind of loose and looks really nice so far. The only thing that slowed me down on this project is the loop stitches take a lot of time and a lot of effort. I've never done these loop stitches before, but there's kind of a process involved, and the loop stitches alternate, so you do use that loop technique quite frequently. It's quite hard on my hands, and the actual yarn itself is quite hard on my hands as well, as it's really rustic and kind of does pull and tug on my hands a bit. So I'm taking it slowly. I'm just doing a few rounds when I pick it up and get the chance to do that, and I'm really happy with it. The other thing that slowed me down is my toy stuffing, and all of my odds and ends of yarn scraps are back with my yarn stash, so I don't have those with me. Even once this pattern is knitted up, up, I won't have anything to stuff it with. So yeah, I'm taking it slowly. I'm going to be back to my yarn stash in about a month or so, so hopefully this will be done by then. I can stuff it and then pop it on my dashboard. I can't wait to show you how this knits up when I'm further in the pattern, as the sheep has so much character, which is exactly what I was looking for in this little sheep toy pattern. And the only thing that I found with this yarn is the loop stitches kind of aren't as defined as the yarn Susan Anderson used in her pattern. And I mentioned this to my boyfriend and he says, well, it looks more like a Herdwick sheep, which I think is entirely true. The Herdwick sheep is quite kind of rugged and looks like it's maybe been through a lot, which is exactly what these loop stitches look like. They look very rugged, very characteristic of a Herdwick sheep, and it brings me so much joy. I'm really enjoying it. So that's my sheep by Susan B. Anderson. I don't have any acquisitions to show you today, but I am in Edinburgh at the moment and I'm planning on heading into a few Edinburgh yarn shops, so I'm hoping to pick up a few more summer yarns whilst I'm there. And I also don't have any plans. I have quite a lot of works in progress at the moment and my Ebba pullover is really drawing me in, so my only plan is to work on that as much as I can and get the Camisole number 9 hopefully finished tonight, and I'll see where that takes me. If you have enjoyed this video, give it a like and a comment. That's my favourite part of this channel, is getting to talk to you guys in the comment section. And if you do wish to do so, subscribe so you can see my updates on all of these works in progress in my next knitting podcast. And I hope you've enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Bye.